Okay, my friends, today I believe I can run a car on water instead of hydrocarbons. And I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you chemistry, and it's already been done. My father did it. There was an issue, though, and now I understand the issue. And I'm going to explain to you exactly, and I'm opening this to everybody. There's no patents going to be able to be done on this. You might be able to patent the fuel or some special technique that you use or some device, but the idea of using hydrogen and oxygen, which is water, to replace hydrogen and carbon, which is hydrocarbons, that cannot be patented by anybody because it's already been done, and I've shown this many times before. But now I'm going to show the device that will actually turn the water into fuel. All right? Now, why do I say we can use hydrogens and carbons, replace them, with hydrogens and oxygen? Well, there's hydrogen, there's carbon, there's oxygen. They're right in the same row. Carbon and oxygen. Now, it's only two, what they would call protons separated, but there's really a batch of different electrons. What happens is the hydrogens get used. So when you use hydrocarbons, you have carbon dioxide given off, and the hydrogens are gone. So the byproduct is carbon dioxide. For water, for hydrogen and oxygen, when you put those back together, you get a hell of a lot of energy, absolutely 100% energy, and all you get back is water. Now, if we could run our equipment and cars and everything on water, and it would just turn back into water after it was used, that would be pretty damn good, because there's no pollution. There's no pollution. You're saying starting with water, you're going back to water. Now, the only thing is water doesn't burn. We know that. How can we make that water burn? We have to make the hydrogen separate from the oxygen. All right? In hydrocarbons, you force the oxygen into the hydro and the carbons, and then that releases the hydrogens. We have the hydrogens and the oxygens forcing together, and automatically they release the hydrogens as particles. That's what gives it its power, and Brown's gas is the proof of that. Let's look at that first, because that is the actual energy that we're going to be using. But as you can see, hydrocarbons, all it is 100% hydrogen and carbon, nothing else. And there is a multitude of different butane and propane and gasoline and all the different things. And that's the only thing that's in the hydrocarbon is carbon and hydrogen. And the only thing that we're talking about in water is oxygen and hydrogen. So the only difference is carbon and oxygen. And the carbon needs the oxygen to combust. We don't need to add any more oxygen. We've got it already. But we have to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen. Now let's talk about that, because I think I have an elegant way to do that and actually increase the gain when we put the hydrogen and the oxygen back together in the Brown's gas formula. All right, now don't forget, we were able to separate the weak force from the strong force. I'm going to show you that right now from light. So there's no reason whatsoever we shouldn't be able to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen, which are two different size molecules. Now, this is light. That's the red laser light. That's the red laser light accelerating due to the Venturi. And I'm going to explain this in great detail, because this is the key, and this is the thing that I'm giving away to the world. Because right after this Venturi, we have separation of charges, and I will show you that. And these are the electron showers. These are the actual particles, and they contain a positive and a negative particle back to back. I showed those before. They're like this. I think I did. Now, watch this. All right, you remember I showed you those particles coming like this. They hit here, and the black part walks away from the white part. The white part explodes like an atomic bomb, just as I showed you here. And the reason is, this is light. Light is the smallest particles that we know of that exist other than electrons. However, Now I'm showing even the particles that exist even within the electron realm can be separated from their non-concussive and concussive components. Okay? So that's the electron. That's what the photon was prior to exploding into the electron, prior to exploding into its two separate, which was the muon and then electron neutrino. Now, then those black particles come back here. There's no reason whatsoever that we shouldn't be able to open this Venturi up or make it bigger or rounder or make it angled somehow, make it cylindrical, something to take the hydrogen and the oxygen water, shooting water in there like through a Venturi, and that's what my father did. That's what he did. And then you take a little needle valve, and that changes the dimension of the Venturi now, and there's a bunch of different ways you could do it, and somebody could patent that, some special way of regulating the Venturi, but you can't patent the idea of using the Venturi to separate the oxygen and the hydrogen. It's been exposed. I exposed this years ago, so don't anybody try to do that. Now, at this point, I can't see why you don't have hydrogen and oxygen. Now, if they were separated and then brought right back together, that energy would be made instantly in this region here. And if this region here was right on top of the piston, you can see what it's doing. It's concussing explosively. Now, my father, I believe, again, this goes a long time ago, and he's no longer with us, so I can't ask him. As I recall, he said they were running it on water and kerosene. And they were originally trying to run it on water exclusively, but the pistons broke or exploded or melted or something along that line. Again, I can't be certain that that's what he said. I believe so. Now, let's do this though. A lot of people have old lawnmowers and so forth. They have little carburetors on them. You can modify that carburetor to suck water in and the gas at the same time if you want. Because I think that's what they did. And I know that's what they're doing right now. Well, let me show you something. All right, I know we're not going to go crazy with this because people get upset, too many details. But this is hydrogen fuel, which is what they're using now. And they're using the hydrogen as an electric fuel, not as like a combustive fuel. Now, they get it by doing electrolysis of water. I think I talked about that before. Or they use steam to push the hydrogen out from methane and coal, and they call it gasification. Hydrogen is found in all right, now, down here was the important part. Here we go. Well, here's what they're using for. Internal combustion engine conversions to hydrogen. This is what I'm talking about. Only we're going to be using a Venturi to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen and then use that hydrogen instead of doing what they're doing is creating hydrogen somewhere else and bottling it or whatever. Now, combustion engines in commercial vehicles have been converted to run on a hydrogen diesel mix in the UK. That's exactly what my father did. Hydrogen, only he used water and separated the hydrogen from the water using a Venturi and then mixed it with actually kerosene. I'd probably almost the same thing. Now they're doing that in the UK. 70% of emissions have been reduced during normal driving conditions. That's amazing. And now, what if you didn't have to use the diesel? You could just use the water. And then, here's well, I'll get into that later, because there's a little more chemistry that, instead of letting the pistons burn up, we need to introduce something into that hydrogen that will diminish its explosiveness, really. And then we need to be able to extract that back later as the gases are, the water is formed, and this leftover, we would need to be extracted with some other molecule. Anyway, I don't think it's a big deal. Anyway, it eliminates the range. All right, anyway, let me get back to what I'm talking about. What they had done is they took regular combustion engines, and they converted them to run on hydrogen diesel mix in the UK, where 70% of emissions had been reduced during driving conditions. It eliminates the range anxiety, as the vehicles can fill up on diesel. They can use diesel or whatever they're doing. Minor modifications are needed to the engines, as well as the addition of hydrogen tanks at the compression of 350 bars. They're putting the hydrogen in. We're going to make the hydrogen out of the water right in there. So we put a water tank on there, and it's called atomization. It sucks the hydrogen right off of the oxygen. All right, trials are now underway to test efficiency, 100% conversion for some Volvo heavy-duty truck to use only hydrogen. Now, I'd love to see them start looking at this water alternative, because all that comes back out is water. And all it amounts to is a Venturi, which creates such an explosive condition where it has to get through the Venturi, that the bigger molecules are going to get separated from the smaller molecules. At least that's what happens here. The non-explosive particles got away from the very explosive particles. So maybe it's going to work. I don't know. I don't have that answer at this moment. Okay, my friends, this is going to get a little involved. It's going to be fun. Get the kids. They'll love this. I have been talking about the Venturi effect. And you say, well, what is that? Well, if you've been listening, you should know already, but I will tell you. It is where you have a restriction in a flow of gas or fluid, which forces the particles to accelerate. And we have shown this, Rod Warren and I, in every single way possible, and I will show it to you again, I'm sure, several times again today. And it's from red laser coming pulsing out of a red laser, or any laser, and as it approaches the Venturi, which is a restriction, like this, you see this? This would be a drum here, and that would be a drum here, and we're going in between them. That's what we have here. All right, can you see that okay? I think you can. Now, for us, we were able to see this, and this is light, but light is identical to fluid. Now they're talking about fluid speed. Light is literally a fluid. It's made of a bazillion particles, and those particles are just like little raindrops. And when they concuss at the Venturi, they explode and fall into a bazillion pieces, and only the explosive pieces get sucked through the Venturi. The non-explosive pieces, and there'll be a black ball and a white ball, and I'll be showing you all this. The non-explosive pieces roll around outside and come back to the explosive parts of light. Way down there. Now, this is light we're dealing with, not dealing with protons or big globs of cannonballs or anything. We're dealing with light. When it came out of here, it came out of here as light. That's a photon. Photons appear to be this, and we see them, so that's what they are. Now, to me, there are two of these, one here and back to back like that. So they become basically stable, and they bounce. They don't incorporate like lightning does, and static and electricity. Electricity is half of this, and this wants to be incorporated with something. This already is incorporated with something, so it bangs off, and that produces light, luminescence. This produces explosive interactions with the particles that it reacts with. So electron, photon. And in the photon, we have a concussive portion and we have a non-concussive portion. And they separate right here when they have to go through that Venturi. And I believe in this section right here, we may be able to harvest the hydrogen away from the oxygen. Now, my father did this in World War II, and I'm making this available to everybody. And I say we can do it again, because he said he did it with a Venturi. And the problem was, though, apparently, it just created too much energy. And either the engine knocked and the pistons burnt up or something like that. The pistons cracked. I can't remember exactly, but what they ended up doing was the same thing they're doing now, is mixing the Well, he's continued to use the water, but he used the water through a Venturi, not creating hydrogen some other way. Because if you go through the Venturi and you get the hydrogen separated from the oxygen, you're just burning oxygen that you'd have to get from somewhere else anyway. So if you can get the hydrogen away from the oxygen, let's say the hydrogen walks away here and the oxygen goes through, we're good to go. When it comes back together, we've got our power. Now, if we could do that, we're in good shape. And I need somebody to experiment. All right, let's just do the chemistry and get that over with. When you have hydrocarbons, you have a carbon and then you have it surrounded by hydrogens. This is methane, the smallest one, and then you get up into like gasoline way up here, where it's like a big long chain of carbons all surrounded with hydrogens. Hydrogens. Now, so in my world, the carrier is the carbon, because we have carbon dioxide left over. Now, with water, you've got hydrogen and oxygen only, no carbons in water. But what it requires, see, the hydrocarbons require extra oxygen, and it leaves pollution of carbon dioxide. Now, water, we don't need any extra oxygens, we don't need any extra hydrogen, we don't need extra anything. However, we need to split the oxygen from the hydrogen. Now, they use an electrolyzer. What that does is it sends electricity through the water, so many extra electrons that it disassociates the hydrogens from the oxygens, because it floods the orbitals with extra electrons, and they just sort of walk away from each other and bubble up into their gases. All right, that's how they do it now. Now, the thing is, if they pump enough hydrogen, enough electricity into the water, they will charge the hydrogen molecules up, and I think they may even be able to charge the oxygen molecules up, but I know they charge the hydrogen molecules up, because Brown's gas is this separated hydrogen and oxygen. But it's not just separated, because if they take hydrogen and oxygen and burn it together, well, it gives you good energy and so forth. But when you take Brown's gas and you put that back together, you got some energy. It melts bricks, it vaporizes tungsten or titanium. I mean, absolutely unbelievable power. And it's because it is raw electrons. And how do I know that? Here's how I know it. When they force their electricity through the water, they put so much electricity through there that they actually load up the hydrogen nucleus. And you say, oh, Roger, how could you load up a nucleus? It's only one proton. How could you load it up? I say, no, it's not one proton. Electron flood theory says it's 1,837 electrons. And we can flood another 20, 30, 40, 50 in there maybe. I don't know how many. But we can put a ton of extra ones in there so that when this is loaded up, it's still semi-stable. Because if you understand atomic nucleus, there's not just one big proton and an electron is hydrogens and they're all the same. Absolutely not. You've got hydrogen 1, hydrogen 2, hydrogen 3, and then in between all of those different big balls, you have a ton of extra particles, which are isotopes. They don't understand. They're just nothing more than electrons. That's all that exists is electrons. And hydrogen is the smallest stable mass of electrons. And at 1837, it's pretty stable, only it will explode very easily, so it's very still explosive. Now, when you punch a bunch of extra electrons in there using this Brown's gas, electrolysis, and it turns them into the gas. That gas is raw electrons. It's raw electricity. And when you put it back together, it makes water, and then the energy that's given off is just absolutely incredible. And here's what happens. That's like your normal gasoline. Well, here's what happens with water. Normally it's H2O. Once you put electricity, force it in, you force a whole batch of extra H's, because the H's are the smallest particles. So you may not have fully H ones in here, but you have a lot more than the H2Os. You force the electricity in to separate the H's and the O's. In addition to that, you have a whole ton of extra electrons that really shouldn't be there in a normal condition, but you force them in. Now, once they've separated, they retain those extra electrons as Brown's gas. And then when you recombine them, they all go away at once, and it's just absolutely stunning the power that it gives off of the Brown's gas. Now, my father told me that apparently, as I'm having a hard time remembering, to be perfectly honest with you, but I know it ended up that they ran it on water and kerosene. All right, no gasoline. Now, I don't know what they're doing now. They're using hydrogen. Now, so he used water. So the water was going through a Venturi. What we need to do is start studying these Venturis in extreme detail, because I can tell you right now, we should be able to run at least what they're using now as the hydrogen. We should be able to get that out of water. That I'm almost sure we can do, just using a simple Venturi. Now, that's hydrocarbons. You see what you got? You got your carbons, and then you got hydrogens all around. Well, what happens when you go through the carburetor? It literally atomizes these things, and oxygen comes in with the hydrogen. So there's your water, really, hydrogen and oxygen, and then you get your carbon. So you end up with carbon dioxide as it combusts. Now, what about oxygen? Water. Well, here's what water. Remember, don't forget, there's your central molecule, your central core atom, which is the carbon, surrounded by hydrogens. We want the hydrogens to end up working with oxygen to burn, because you need oxygen, otherwise you're not going to get burned. This is not going to happen. So the oxygen has to be there. So you got hydrogen, the oxygen, the carbon. That's what gives you the explosion. Well, guess what? If you took just oxygen and hydrogen, look, the same things, hydrogen all over the place and oxygen. Well, we don't have any carbons. Hydrogen and oxygen ends up with water. And after that, virtually 100% electrons. There is no impurities, there's no carbon, there's no black smoke coming off of it. And that's what burnt through the pistons, and my father didn't understand about, I think. Again, I'm sort of guessing at this point. But I think if we could somehow figure a way of, when we inject the water through the vaporizer, through the Venturi to atomize it, when it recombines itself, we need to have something else, another molecule or atom in amongst this that slows down that, or absorbs some of the electrons or something, because we have too many electrons invading the materials. That's why it's used in welding, in Brown's gas welding. Okay, my friends, I think I have a breakthrough in power. This is called Brown's gas. And what is going on here is they are forcing water to break apart the hydrogen and the oxygen. And they're doing that by forcing enormous amounts of electric current through the water, and which means they're forcing a ton of extra electrons in that make the oxygen separate from the hydrogen, because they are only bounded by sharing electrons. So if you put so many extra electrons in there, they just unshare and they go their own separate way. Well, in the meantime, not understanding the nuclear core, they didn't understand why Brown's gas was so volatile, and it is volatile as hell, as you will see uno momento. The reason is every nucleus is all constructed of electrons, and every electron has a dipole, It means it has a positive and a negative. However, you see the red ones on the outside? Those are the negatives. They don't want to touch each other, and they want to get away from each other, and they always surround the black center, which is the nucleus, which doesn't matter. These guys don't care. The negative ones will go up and touch each other and hold each other's hands, and they'll walk around together and have a good time. But the white balls, and I will show you, they're going to be a black ball, which is the weak one. It doesn't care. It's friendly with everybody. And the black one, I mean the white one, which says, get away from me, just you come near me, I'm going to explode. And that's what happens when you put them through a Venturi, and they have to get so close to each other that the white ones just explode like an atomic bomb. The black ones just roll away. And I'll show you that, and then they come back together. You've probably seen it probably 100 times by now if you've been following this. But this is electron flood theory. It means nothing exists except electrons. In a hydrogen, the minimum number of electrons you will have is 1837 in the nucleus. That is your proton, basically. 1838 would be a neutron. And then you go up from there. But they're quantities of electrons. They're not one big proton, one big neutron. There's 1837 electrons in a proton, which makes it positive. And there's 1838, which makes it the neutral, which is an even number. Now, helium, you go all the way up to 7,350, which is the next element up. And that's because it has 2 protons and 2 neutrons. And you add up all those numbers, and it ends up with 7,350 electrons, which gives it a very solid dark core and a very fine white line around it, which would be the negative explosive part, and then it will influence a certain region around itself very securely because of that setup. Now let me show you what that looks like, actually, because I can show you that. All right, if electron flood theory is right, as you're coming in, you will be coming into a glowy region which surrounds the black core, and as you get tighter and tighter and tighter and you hug up right against it, you're going to see that there's a fine line surrounding that black inner positive core, which these are the negatives who want to get away, and they always will glow a little bit. Well, watch this. Here it is right here. Boom. All right. Now watch this. As I come close, you see it start to glow out around it? You see it glowing out there? And as I get closer and closer, bam, then they get tighter and tighter against the nucleus. And the nucleus has a black core, and then it has the white electron, negative parts surrounding it. This is what we see here. Now, watch this here. Now, in every atom, you're going to have a core that's going to be basically like this, 3 dimensions. Now, I can only show this very, in 2 dimensions. But watch the white and the black separations. You see that? I hope you can see that well. You see that? Every one of those has a positive and a negative. Let's just take one. There it is right there. Watch what happens as I roll it. Let's see if I can make you see that. You see it flip its magnetic pole, flip-flop? See, flip, 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 flip. But you can see it has the dark core and the white on the outside of it. And if you get it in a certain position, you can see it's sort of, see it right there? Let me see if I can get a better place where, watch this, this is really cool stuff. If you take this and rub it a certain way, it depolarizes the thing, or repolarizes, or whatever. Let me back this up out of here. Actually, the square ones are the better ones. But they all have that same look to it. Remember how I showed you? Watch, see this? Same thing here, see? The white always surrounds the black. And here's 2 of them side by side. Watch if you go like this. You see how the poles are separated, and now they're doing some strange, you could really do some crazy stuff. Because you could go this way, or that way, this way, that way, but you can't go this way, and you can't go this way, and you can't go that way, and you can't go this way. But if you lay them, there's all kind of different polarities and so forth. So what we really need to do is get a couple of bar magnets, paint them white and black and white and all these different colors on different sides. You know, try to figure out what the polarities are, and then match them up and see what pushes what where, which ones, because it's very cool. Like you can sort of go this way, but then it's going to flip over. It holds, and that. But when you come out this far, it won't stay. There's all kinds of zones of stability and zones of instability. That's what I'm getting at. And the only way for you to do it is to take and do something like this only with magnets, and then put them against each other and see, you know, which ones push and which ones shove and which one attract and which one oppose and and I don't know, it's fun. But there's a lot can be done here. There's no question. You should see the new stuff they're doing with the 3D printing of magnetic fields. Absolutely fascinating.